Hi guys, this is Dr. Piston, and today we were talking about my new, or I can say 7 months old Avenger bike, which I have bought and didn't make a video about it unfortunately because I was kind of busy and the bike was with me, and my brother used to drive it, my father used to drive it, so I didn't get really much of a time to make a video. But we are going to take this bike and we want to look in it why I brought this bike. This is a 2015 model. I had an option of buying a 2016 model, but I opt for this one. First of all, I want to talk with why Avenger. So it's a beautiful bike. I mean, it has been in production for ages by Bajaj. It was essentially called the Illuminator by Kawasaki. They derived all the chassis and the framework and metalwork and all from Bajaj Eliminator. They used an Pulsar 220 engine on this. There are three options on this bike: the 160 engine, the 180 engine, and the 220 engine. I want to talk about why I bought this bike over Pulsar 220. I had an option of Pulsar 220, by the way. I had an option of Pulsar NS 200 also, but I kind of like this bike because it is a proper cruiser, budget cruiser, and it has aged well on this Indian market. So I guess I just wanted a bike that was proper, reliable, and the parts were available. These parts are very cheap because Bajaj makes most of the parts here only in Aurangabad, so the parts availability is not a big issue, and most of them are derived from pulsars only, like the cable, clutch wire, the brakes, the pads, and all of the things are readily available. So that's why I opt for this bike. Also, I wanted something that I can use for long distance travels. So the bike I had in mind was the Thunderbird 350, but it was a bit expensive and too heavy for traffic maneuvering and all. So I opt for this. This is a 220cc bike. It is not too much of a weight hassle per se to ride on the cities and all. So this bike has been a great companion to me. So now we are going to discuss the pros and cons of owning this bike, and believe me, there are more pros than cons. So first of the cons is this chrome panel on the tank. Some of the models get the matte black one, which are the street models that came around 2016ish kind of deal. I don't know, but the reason why I'm talking about this is this panel reflects so much light on your face when you are riding on the noon and all. Then in the afternoon, if you face the sun on top of you, it will directly reflect all those sun rays on your eyes, which is kind of distraction. And the second thing I kind of think as a con of this bike is the weight distribution, and it is not a problem to this bike per se, it is a problem to all the cruisers. So most of the weight, as you can see, the rider and the pillion weights, most of the weight goes on the rear tire and not on the front tire. This is okay when you are riding on straight lines, highways and all, but the problem comes when you are braking this. So most of the weight is on the back and not on the front. You can't really use the full potential of the brake on the front. So that's why it is prone to skidding. And if you turn this bike, like per se, if your handle is not straight, and even a slight amount of turn on the bike will properly skid this bike. I didn't have much of an accident per se, but I have slipped 2 or 3 times to say that it is quite dangerous. The later models have ABS on this, but that helps surely, but this one doesn't have it, and I think it's really important to know that. The third con is the electronics package on this bike. So this switchgear is really cheap, man. If you consider any of the bike from a premium 1 lakh 20,000 kind of a bikes, this quality of switchgear is really cheap. As you can see, if you guys know, if you are enthusiastic about bikes and all, this is the same switchgear that comes on Discover bikes. So Discovery is their budget segment bikes which are 100cc commuters. Then also a cruiser, proper cruiser gets this kind of switchgear is really not so premium about it. And one of the issues I face is while riding on the rain, the water gets down this button here, properly button, and you can't switch it from high beam to low beam as frequently. You have to let it dry a little bit, then it's start functioning. And somewhat here also the engine kill switch also has that problem. It doesn't accord as much on this switch as on that switch, but it is a problem. The fourth and I think the major part about this bike is actually associated with locking this bike. So as you can see, it's a cruiser. The key fob is here right next to the engine, so it's convenient for switching on and off, kill switch on ignition and all. But the problem arises if you want to lock your handlebars. You have to take the key from here and place it here. So guys, after locking this bike properly, when you are going somewhere, so what will you do? If you kind of forget that you have locked this handlebar here, and you just go for the ignition, you turn it on, fire up the engine and go. So what happens is you try to straighten up this handle and it is locked, and it is can be potentially dangerous for some if you don't remember that you have locked this previously. So that's a big con of this bike. I think Bajaj should innovate something and just use some of the mechanics so that there is only one key fob for locking the handle and also the ignition of this bike. So the finally time comes for the pros of this bike. So the pros of this bike is the quality of ride that the suspensions provide. It's a long travel suspension on the front. There is an shock absorber. There is not a mono suspension on this. There is that regular shock absorber. I don't know what they're called, unfortunately. So the ride quality on the bike is really plush, and the big wide seat helps also for riding. The handlebars are raised quite properly. The cruise model gets that elongated bar, the Harley Davidson style bars, so it also enhances the riding experience of this bike pretty much. So the pillion also, I forgot about that, the pillion also get and backrest to rest their back. So it's a kind of a good bike to ride on long distances and all. So that's one of the pros. The second pros is the engine itself. So you kind of like this engine because of this torque it provides on the low RPMs. So if you are cruising around city, the most of the bikes you have to properly change gear every time the speeds get low. Not on this bike. You can just rely on the torque of the bike to properly manage it and commute through the cities. The torque of this bike is really awesome, and I really love to ride this bike around the cities and all. Most of the part of it doesn't get an RPM meter or somewhat tachometer. It just get a speedometer with a trip indicator. But then again, I kind of adjusted to the whole situation. But the torque of this bike in low RPMs and in the mid-range kind of is very good, and it's kind of a progressive, so it is really easy to ride on that torque curve. Not a high RPM bike, by the way. It just run off to his chooses on 7,000 ish RPM. No point of revving this bike up, by the way. So if you are owning this bike, there has to be some mechanical issues. Fortunately for me, there are no mechanical issues per se, just regular wear and tear. I have changed this oil on this, and after buying this bike, the oil started leaking from this gasket here. I don't know why. So oil is leaking. I want to have this rebuilt, but it is not a big issue. Bajaj Bajaj bikes commonly have this problem, so it's not a big issue. As long as you are topping up the oil and checking the oil regularly, it's not a big issue for me per se. And one of the problem is that this sort of a oil pipe that comes to this radiator, that is oil cold for the gearbox, is kind of getting rusted. So that's one of the issue. I probably get this thing replaced in coming days. So that's one of an issue I have faced with this bike. You guys should take a note. This one has the spoke wheels, so the spoke wheels and the tire is a tube tire. The most of the later models have tubeless tire. I suggest you to go for the tubeless tire because if this thing get punctures, it's very big pain just to take the tube out, because it's such a giant tire. The gap between the swing arm and the tire is pretty low, so it's going to be a pain if you are doing it yourself. And I prefer to have a tubeless tire over tube tire any day of the week. So that's about it, guys. I will wrap up this video, and comment, like, subscribe, the usual. So bye guys.